Okay, so I think we can start. Thank you for joining. I'll start with the introduction and maybe more people will join by the time I finish. So thank you very much for coming to this meeting. And this is an experimental event. This is the first time I am doing anything like that. And yeah, let's see how it goes. But the idea is to have something without slides, like have a conversation. And the topic for today is the roles in a data science team. Not necessarily in a data science team, but in a data team. What kind of roles are there? What kind of responsibilities they have? What do they do? And so for those who are not part of our Data Talks club yet, who are not in Slack, so you can join in our Slack using this link, join.datatalks.club. And for questions today, we will use Slido. So to make it more interactive, I don't know how it will work. So for the first session, we will experiment a bit and see if it makes sense to use Slido or maybe have like a discussion. Let's see. So I'll stop sharing my screen because the idea for this session is to have something without slides. So basically just talk about something and then also release this recording as a podcast so people can listen to this while going somewhere, so without any visuals. So let me share a link with you, so the link to slides. If you have any questions during the talk today, please feel free to use Slido for asking that. And so let me start. Just quickly taking a look at my notes. So the topic today is, as I said, the roles in data team. So we want to understand what kind of people work in a data team, what kind of responsibilities they have, what they do, what they need to know, what they don't have to know, and things like that. And maybe first a few words about myself. So I work as a lead data scientist. And this means that my views might be a bit biased towards views of a data scientist. This is, you can see this like, this is how a data scientist sees other people. So I might not necessarily be right in all the aspects. So if you think I'm wrong somewhere, please tell me. Because again, like maybe the views how I see data engineers are simplified because I don't see all the complexities of the work they're doing as a data scientist. Yeah, so let's start. So in a data team, there are many different roles. So first, we have a product manager. So product manager is somebody who is responsible for entire product, for making sure that the team is building the right thing. And then we have data specialists. So product manager is maybe a little bit less technical role than the rest. But then we have people like data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, machine learning engineers. Then we have also something new called MLOps engineers. And it's often difficult to understand who is who and who needs to do what. And this is why we have this conversation today to answer these questions. And in addition to that, there are also like more traditional roles, like backend engineers, front-end engineers, mobile engineers, or site reliability engineers. All these people also often work together with data scientists and other people, and work together to create data science products. And let's start with core responsibilities. We will use an example. Let's say, so I work at OLX Group. OLX Group is OLX is a platform for online classifieds. So this is a place where you can go to see things you don't need. So let's say to sell things. Let's say you have an iPhone you want to sell. You go to this website, create a listing, and sell your iPhone. And then if you want to buy something, you go to OLX. You go through different advertisements. You find what you like, and buy it eventually. And imagine that there is a problem that we want to automatically detect the category of an item. So let's say I'm selling an iPhone, I'm creating a listing, and I want to understand that iPhone should go to mobile phones category. So this is the problem we will use for illustration. And let's start with the product manager. So the main responsibility of a product manager is to make sure that the team is building the right thing. So actually that whatever we build, whatever whatever service we create will be used by the user. Because often what happens is team is solving some problem, but at the end, these services are not used. And this is indeed a problem in many companies. And that's why the role of a product manager exists, to make sure that the team are close to the user, as close to the user as possible. And so the product manager is somebody who speaks on behalf of a user. And the main skills here are communication skills. So maybe for a data scientist, communication skill is a soft skill, but for a product manager, it's more like a hard skill. So this is something they have to do to do their work. Then they also need to do a lot of prioritization, planning, and things like this to really understand, to really tell others what is more important, what is less important, what the team should focus on, and what they shouldn't focus on. And let's say, let's go back to our example. Let's say somebody comes with a request. Hey, we want to build this feature to automatically categorize a listing. So somebody is selling iPhone. We want to predict that this is mobile phones. So so first of all, this person would go to a product manager. So product manager receives these kind of requests. So they act as a sort of a gateway to receive all these requests. And then the task of a product manager is to figure out, do users really need that? Is this feature really important? Is it an important problem to solve or not? And they often work together with data analysts to really understand if this problem is worth solving with data analysts or with data scientists. And the role of a data analyst is to understand the data, understand what kind of data we have, and explain this data to others. So analysts would know all the data that we have in our company, and they know how to get this data. They know how to interpret results. They are in charge of building different dashboards, of defining KPIs, let's say showing profit or number of listings, or like how many contacts buyers made to sellers, all the important metrics, all the important business metrics. Data analysts know how to capture these metrics and how to present them in a way that others will understand. So they also are in charge of building reports, often to executive team with some actionable recommendations. And when it comes to skills, data analysts should know SQL. This is the main tool. Then they should know some programming language like Python or R. They should also be comfortable using Tableau or things like this for building dashboards. They also should know they should know basics of statistics to be able to do experiments, different experiments, and a bit of machine learning, let's say to do some regression analysis, maybe time series to do some prediction. Let's say if we want to predict how many listings will be next week or next month, this is something that data analysts can also do. And data analysts in this example would help quantify the extent of a problem for the product manager. So for example, if somebody comes with a problem, let's say, let's build a model for automatic categorization of listings. Data analysts would help to quantify the problem. How many users are are affected by this, how many users cannot finish creating the listing because of this, because they let's say they cannot select the right category, or how many listings are there that don't have the right category. So analysts could go fetch the data and say, okay, this problem is indeed a problem. And then together with product managers, they can say, okay, this problem is indeed worth solving. And then the team will basically go ahead and start solving this problem. Also, what data analysts often do is, so let's say we develop this feature, we have this model that categorizes the listings, and we want to understand if this service is actually effective. So this model really helps people and solves the problem. So what we typically do is we run some sort of experiment, like an A/B test, and we check that indeed we expected that fewer users will drop from the posting flow, so more users will be able to successfully finish posting an item for selling, or there will be fewer ads that end up in the wrong category. And we run an experiment, and then the task of a data analyst is to quantify, to understand, okay, if this model indeed helps over using a model or not. And then we have a data scientist. So in case like data scientists and data analysts, like they're pretty similar roles, and in some companies it's actually the same person who is doing both the jobs. But typically data scientists, they focus more on predicting rather than explaining. So a data analyst goes, fetches the data, looks at this data and explains what is going on, and then gives some recommendations. But the task of a data scientist is focused more on predicting, okay, how we can use this data to, let's say, to build a machine learning model for predicting something. So they're using the data, incorporating the data in the product. So it's more, the focus is more on engineering than analysis. So that's the main difference, in my opinion, between a data scientist and a data analyst. So the data scientists, they are more more engineers, sort of, and they work closely with actually integrating data solution in the product that the users use. And the skills for a data scientist are, of course, machine learning, because this is the main tool that they use for building these predictive services. And then Python as a programming language, of course, SQL to fetch the data and train a model on top of that. And then things like Flask and Docker to actually create a simple web service for serving this model. And in our example, when we want to predict the category of an item, so this would be the data scientists are the people who actually go and develop the model for predicting this category. And then once they have a model, they predict a simple, they develop a simple web service for hosting this model. And then we have data engineers. Data engineers are doing all the heavy lifting when it comes to data. So for data scientists and data analysts to be able to use this data, like a lot of work needs to happen to make it possible for data analysts just to go to a database, fetch the data, do the analysis, and come up with a report. And this is the focus of data engineers, to make sure that this is possible, that the data, all the data that is needed appears in the form that is consumable, that it doesn't affect the main product. So this is usually it's called like creating a data lake. So all the data that users generate, it's captured in a proper way and saved in a separate database in such a way that analysts can run the analysis, data scientists can use this data for training models and things like this. So they make it possible to run analytical queries on the data that users generate. Also, what they need to do often is, especially at larger companies, they need to make sure that people who only people who are supposed to look at the data can actually access it. So people who are just snooping around and trying to look at personal data, they cannot do this unless they really have a business reason, let's say, to look at emails or mobile phones. So they need to build a system that that doesn't let people just to go ahead and access all the data. And skills here for data engineers are usually for most of the companies I saw, at least in Germany, in Europe. So usually data engineers need to know some cloud provider like AWS. I think it's the most popular. Then Google Cloud, also quite popular. They also need to know some infrastructure tools like Kubernetes, Terraform, then some data services like Kafka or maybe RabbitMQ. So this is things like for capturing the data, processing the data, then saving this data somewhere. And of course, like it's a database. So this is where the data is saved at the end, such that it's accessible for data analysts at the end. And things like data orchestration tools like Airflow, they also need to know how to use them to build complex data pipelines. And basically in the task that we have, like creating a service for predicting the right category for a listing. So data engineers make sure that all the data that we need for making it possible, first for doing the analysis, like for quantifying the problem, this data is there. And then the data about the listings themselves, like everything we want to use for predicting the category, it's also there. So this is their main responsibility. That's not the only kind of an engineer we have. So we have other engineers, machine learning engineer, for example. And the machine learning engineer is somebody who takes whatever data scientists build, and their task is to scale that. So they have data scientists build a service, and machine learning engineers pick up this service and make sure this service is scalable, it's maintainable. We follow the best engineering practices, and the focus here is more on engineering than on modeling. And when I say taking what data scientists build, I actually mean is not just, okay, data scientists finish their work, okay, here's a model, take it and do something with this, but rather working together with data scientists. So like side by side, and making sure that the services that data scientists develop, they are scalable, they are maintainable, and the best engineering practices are there. And here skills are similar to data engineers in a way. So they also need to use the cloud, infrastructure tools like Kubernetes, Terraform. They need to use Python, some other programming languages. And also they work often closely with like traditional engineers, like backend engineers, front-end engineers, or maybe mobile engineers, to actually make sure that these models are included in the final product that users use. Does somebody have a question? Or maybe I just hear some noises. Okay, so I'll finish. I'll continue. So in our example, this predicting the category. So actually, machine learning engineers ideally work together with data scientists on making sure that this model can be productionized, and once it's rolled out to the users, it's stable. It won't. It will sustain on the load, and it's actually maintainable, and it's possible to make some changes in the future when we need to change something in this service. Then another kind of engineers, they're also pretty important in a data team. They are called DevOps engineers, or sometimes site reliability engineers. So they focus, so they're also like machine learning engineers, but they focus more is on availability and reliability of the services. So they are not strictly So they are not strictly working with data only. So they are just, this is like a role in general. So they focus more on infrastructure than business logic. So on things like networking, provisioning all this like infrastructure, like all the servers where our services are running. So they take care of collecting all the operational metrics like CPU usage, how many requests per second our services process, things like that. They often set up alerts, they have on call, things like this. So they really focus on making sure that the services are up and running all the time without any breaks. And if something breaks, uh, as there is, site reliability engineers can quickly diagnose the problem and fix it, patch it, or involve an engineer to actually help them. And skills here are, again, pretty similar to ML engineers. So they will need to know clouds, infrastructure tools, programming language like Python, but they also need to be Unix, Linux experts. They need to know networking. They should also know and follow all the best DevOps practices like automation, CI/CD, things like this. Of course, ML engineers and data engineers should also know that, but DevOps engineers, site reliability engineers, they focus on making sure that these practices are followed, and they come up with tools to make sure that it's happening. It's also, maybe you heard about a MLOps engineer. So this is, I would say, pretty recent trend to have like MLOps, not just DevOps, but MLOps. In my opinion, and many people disagree, but in my personal opinion, so MLOps is a DevOps engineer who knows the basics of machine learning. So they know some machine learning concepts. So let's say they know what a model is. They know that it's not deterministic. Sometimes it gives um, like the output is a probability. They know, let's say, the life cycle of machine learning model. So let's say there is a training phase, there is a serving phase, but their background is more like operational support than anything else. So they still know and follow all these DevOps practices. They make sure that everybody is following them. They set up all this continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines, and things like this. And yeah, so their responsibility is to make sure that the services we develop, data scientists, machine learning engineers, data engineers, they are up and running all the time. So that's, I think, like the overview of the roles. So just to summarize, so we have a product manager. So they are making sure that the team is building the right thing. So they act as a gateway to all the requests. They are close to the user. Data analysts are people who need to understand and analyze data. They need to interpret the results, build dashboards, and things like that. Data scientists, they're often people who are actually building the models and incorporating these models in the product. Data engineers are people who preparing all the data for analysts and data scientists to make their life easier. Machine learning engineers help data scientists scale the machine learning services and establish best engineering practices. And site reliability engineers focus on availability, reliability, and best DevOps practices. So making sure that the service is up and running all the time. And if something breaks, they can quickly fix it, even if it's, let's say, at night or over the weekend. And I had a question from Ankush in our discussion in Slack. So he asked, how can data engineers support others? And I think I mostly answered that question during the description of the roles. And just maybe to be a bit more concrete. So I think the best way data engineers can support others, can support data analysts and data scientists and all the rest, is to work together in one team, work on the same problem, even though the focus is different. But when you work on the same problem, let's say if we work on this we want to build a service that predicts, that identifies a category of a listing correctly. Then we want to work together as a one team, and then data engineers will make sure that all the needed data, the data we need for analysis, the data we need for training a model is there. And if it's not, they usually take care of making sure that this data is available. Yeah. And in some cases also, so I described a case when a model is running online. So let's say a data scientist develops a model, and then they put this inside a web service, and then machine learning engineers helps them to make sure this is scalable. But this is a web service, and this thing is up and running all the time. But sometimes we have models that we don't necessarily use in this way. Sometimes we just want to predict something, let's say once per hour or once per day. So for these cases, we don't need a web service. So one example could be, let's say we have many users on our platform, and we want to identify users who would be interested in a particular listings. So basically, we will want to advertise them something. And from all the users we have, we want to find users who are most likely to react positively to this kind of advertising. Usually, we don't need to do this in real time. It's fine if we do it, let's say, once per day. So once per day, we run our model, score all our users, and see that for this kind of ads, these users are more likely to be interested in these ads. And then let's say we just send emails to these users saying, hey, you might be interested in seeing this. And in this case, we don't serve the models online, we do it offline. We call it batch serving because we do this periodically. And then the job of data engineer, they would help data scientists to actually make sure that it's possible to include this model in this, like to execute the model in such a way that, let's say, run it periodically, let's say every day, and basically help. So the job of a data engineer here would be to help data scientists get the data into the model, and then the model does some prediction, and they will also help get the data out of the model and save it in such a way that this data can later be used by other services. Yeah, so I think I want to quickly look if we have any questions. So, sorry, my slide disappeared somewhere. So let me now share my screen so you can also see the questions. So the first question we have is, what is the difference between machine learning engineer and data engineer in scaling out the data science models? I think I partly answered that. So in my personal opinion, this is at least the trends. This is what I see around me in the companies where I worked or in other companies, that machine learning engineers mostly work on, again, the line is kind of blurry, but the main difference in my opinion is that machine learning engineers focus more on like online things, like let's say we have a model and we want to serve it online so it can be used from a product, then this is what the machine learning engineer would do. And if this is something we want to do offline, execute it once per day, this is something that a data engineer would do. But again, like data engineers also involved in things like setting up Kafka, and then Kafka, of course, is more real time than offline. So you can argue here that okay, it's not really clear what is the difference. And yeah, in some cases, there is no difference. So actually, both roles are doing the same job. But one thing you can separate the two, in my opinion, is data engineer is somebody who helps to prepare the data. So it's before the job of a data scientist. And machine learning engineer is like somebody who is picking up the model and doing the job after. Or again, like it's not like a wall and then a data scientist just throws a model over this wall. So of course they work together, and then data engineer would work together with data scientists to develop a model, and then data scientists will work together with machine learning engineer to actually serve the model. So again, this is just my opinion, and I think opinions differ on this question, and it's not, in some companies there is not really a difference. Another question is, should the team also have a business analyst sitting in between product manager and data managers? Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good idea. And this is like a business analyst, what I called an analyst. Of course, again, like sometimes the roles are different between, like, let's say, we have product analysts, we have data analysts, we have business analysts. So sometimes it's different roles, sometimes it's the same roles. So it's somehow difficult to draw a line here. But I think they are pretty similar in this sense that they help product manager to quantify the size of a problem and to understand if this problem is actually worth solving. And in some teams, I know that there is even no product manager. There is just a business analyst who translate the requirements of a user to the team. So it's also possible. What communication or soft skills are required in different positions? I think, yeah, the main soft skill is communication skill, in my opinion. Like basically being able to talk to each other and understand each other. Well, let's say when we work, everyone works in a team. Product managers are less technical, data engineers and machine learning engineers are more technical, and site reliability engineers, they are even more like they have even more hardcore skill in Unix and whatnot. And basically everyone in this team should be able to speak in the same language. And then a data scientist says something about machine learning, they need to make sure that everyone on the team understands what they are saying. So instead of going deep into saying, hey, like the gradient is exploding here or things like this, so no one understands what they talk about. So they of course have to work with others and really explain what the problem is, how to address the problem, maybe using metaphors or things like this. And for analysts, I think probably for all the positions, writing documentation is important. Of course, documentation is different for, let's say, for machine learning engineers, for other engineers. Like when they write documentations, this is usually intended for other engineers. For analysts, they need to be probably better at writing in a sense that they really need to know how to write in such a way that management understands. Let's say the executive team understands what is the problem and what is the solution they are proposing. Let's say when they are writing different reports about different things. Yeah, so I think here, like the more person he talks to the business side of things, to the user, then they need to have a slightly different set of communication skills. But again, I think the most important thing is that everyone in the team understands each other. I hope I answered that. What roles do you see dependent on the size of the team? For example, would you see a machine learning engineer in a small team or added on later in development? Yeah, it again really depends on the company. So in I I think there was a trend a while ago. I'm not sure it still exists, but many people thought that they can just hire a data scientist, and this data scientist would just solve all the problems that a company has. And of course, that wasn't true, because then they realized, okay, we probably need a data engineer, we probably need a machine learning engineer, we probably need a data analyst. And yeah, I think, yeah, of course, like if it's just starting, and then for a small company, for a small team, having a deep, like a data engineer who knows a bit of machine learning is probably enough. Or it can be a machine learning engineer as well who knows how to set up the data pipelines and things like that. Yeah, ideally it should be somebody who knows how to do things end to end. And again, a machine learning engineer could be that person. Like if that person knows how to set up a data pipeline, how to train a model, and how to serve it, then this person is an ideal candidate for a small team. And then, of course, when the project becomes bigger, the team grows, and then there are people who specialize more in certain areas. And of course, then it makes sense to add more people. But yeah, I don't think there is right or wrong answer. It just depends on what the company wants to achieve and what kind of person this ML machine learning engineer is. And I'm just thinking out loud that maybe in some cases it actually makes sense to hire machine learning engineer as the first person in a team, like because they are engineers, they know how to build things. It wouldn't be a problem for them to figure out how to build a data pipeline. It wouldn't be a problem for them to figure out how to serve a model. And since they are machine learning engineers, they know a bit of machine learning to actually to train a simple model like logistic regression or like a decision tree, and already start solving a business problem and start bringing value to the company. And then once this person can show the value in this product, in this service, then the team can start growing and add more people like data engineers, data scientists, and whatnot. Do data engineers work on big data? Yeah. So I think if the data is small, again, there is probably a question like how large data should be to call it big data. But let's say, I don't know, a few million events per day, or maybe even 100 million events per day, that would qualify as big data. And then, of course, you need to have a person who is dedicated to just processing this data, because the data has a lot of, like, there is a lot of volume, a lot of data, and then it will not be possible for a data scientist to take care of everything. And then in this case, of course, we need a data engineer who will work on making sure that the data can process the data is stored in the right format, and others can access this data. But let's say if it's a small company and there is not so much load, so let's say it's not a company that works in advertisement, they don't generate a lot of events per day, then potentially, like, even a data scientist who does not necessarily have a lot of a very strong engineering background can already develop a first prototype. Okay. Is there a need separation between full stack machine learning developers, backend full stack data science models, deployment, and front-end full stack? Okay, so just to make sure I understood the question, I want to rephrase it. So the question is asking if so we have different kind of full stack engineers. So we have machine learning full stack engineers. So this is like when you, let's say you have a full stack data scientist who can do things end to end, and then you have front end like web engineers, full stack engineers who can do things there end to end. And I think we actually need the separation here, because in my opinion, like when we are talking about a full stack engineer, so this is somebody who mostly focuses on web. So let's say we quickly want to create an application that users can use, like a web application. And this is what they would do. And nature of work here is a bit different from data science. So the process is a bit different. And we'll talk about processes on our next event, next meeting, next Friday. But I think fundamentally the processes, they're similar, but there are some differences as well. So in, let's say in a case of full stack data scientists, they need to be aware, like they need to focus more on data science and backend. And in my opinion, web developers, full stack web developers, they focus more on front end and a bit of backend. Yeah, so I think there is not a lot of connection between these two. But I might be wrong, and I can imagine that there are some companies, especially early stage startups, where one person can do everything, starting from setting up a company's website, to collecting the data, to training a model, and then maybe even configuring Wi-Fi routers in the office. Yeah, so I can imagine that this can also happen, but as the company grows, there is more and more separation. And of course, at the end, like when the company is big, we have all these different roles, which we talked about today. If in a rather small team, there is no machine learning ops or DevOps engineer, who would most likely perform the task? Yeah, so in my opinion, it would be just an engineer. So let's say if a company already has a backend engineer, so it could be that backend engineer. So it should be possible to train that person to explain the basics of machine learning, and they will be able to perform this job. Or of course, yeah, at some point the company will need to hire that or grow internally somebody into this role. If somebody wants to add something, like maybe clarify a question. Or... Okay. I think it will be really good if you put together roles and responsibilities matrix when you make this available online. So what I already have, this is the notes for today. I will share that with you, like all this description. It's of course possible to put it in a matrix form. And yeah, this is something we can do after this meeting. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know how it went. So it was, to me, it was fun, but maybe too much talking and not a lot of slides. So definitely I would be interested in hearing your opinion about this event. Want to do something next week again, something similar. Yeah, I don't know if I should include slides next time or not. Yeah, so please share your thoughts in Slack or now if you want. Yeah, I guess then we are wrapping up for today. And thank you very much for attending the session today. And looking forward to seeing you next week. So next week on Tuesday, we have a talk about duplicate detection with CMS networks. And then on Friday, we have something similar to what we had today. We'll talk about processes. So talk to you soon. Goodbye.